You all join palms and repeat after me. I take refuge in the Buddha. I take refuge in the Dharma. I take refuge in the Sangha. Keeping the palms joined. Put the palms down. All right, good morning, everybody. Good to see you all here. Thanks for being here. Where else would we be, right? It's funny, I don't usually, I guess in like stories or things I say, I talk about myself a little bit with like experiences or things I've learned or ways I've screwed up and caused tremendous pain and suffering and harm. Talk about that a lot. But I don't think I really talk too much about, although many of you know me, so it won't be that big of a surprise. But I think often people forget how important a place like this is for myself and those of us who run it. Often there's this kind of disconnect that people, how many of you here maybe for the first time? A couple of you? One or two? Oh, great. I already made the first person here for the first time move, right? How'd you feel when I did that? Now I'm going to tell you, came together. So you can fill them in after. Yeah. How'd you feel? Can I pick on them now or should I leave them alone? Leave them alone. Yeah. So when I came in, there were a couple people I asked to, split apart just so we can keep everybody in the seats where we're comfortable having people in. So I appreciate you all sitting. You're not the only one I picked on, but I appreciate you all sitting in the spaces that we have asked you to sit in. It just allows us to keep people here and be comfortable with everyone here. But as I was saying earlier, I don't talk too much about how important a place like this is to myself and those of us who run it. But what I want to remind people of is that we're not like these people who have everything figured out and are the leaders of this temple and are like guiding you to your awakening, right? We are as much, if not more of a mess than every single one of you sitting in this room right now. So please do not forget that. We are practitioners. Some of us, in fact, years ago, I read a story about one of the greatest divorce counselors in the country. She's been divorced like 8 times, right? Which makes her apparently an expert on that subject. Because she had failed so many times, she became very aware of what doesn't work in relationships, right? So I look at sharing the Dharma the same way, right? Where because for myself, I can't speak for anyone else around here, but for myself as a practitioner, because I've struggled for so long, for so many years, with everything that I sit up here and talk about, that's why it's so easy for me to sit up here and talk about it. It doesn't mean we can do all of these things, right? So it's always good to remind those of you who, maybe some of you have been around a long time, you've heard me give this talk. Some of you maybe are newer, and so you haven't heard me give this talk. But it's always important as a reminder, or for those of you who might be newer, to not think that there's like this, we are the people who lead and you're all down here, right? because I don't know what's going on in any of your minds, but if it's anything like my mind, then I'm really sorry, because it's not fun. So please do not forget that. Do not put us on these pedestals thinking that just because we sit up here and that we hit a bell and we say a bunch of Buddhist words in some other language, that means we have any sort of greater insight or wisdom or knowledge than anyone else in this space. In fact, I find myself as a practitioner learning more from all of you in your questions, in your responses, in your stories than I could even imagine. So please remind yourself of that. And that it's a continuous practice. It is not something that you become an expert at or a master at, or you don't get a little Buddhist certificate that says like, oh, you've attained something. Although I guess if you do a Dharma Bum Life program, you get a certificate. But that's kind of more the fact that we joke about that there are no certificates in Buddhism. So when we do our little 8-week Dharma Bum Life program, we give them a certificate just to say you've completed the Dharma Bum Life program, which means absolutely nothing. No offense to you who've completed it. All right. So that's my rant this morning, just as a reminder that a place like this and all Buddhist temples and all the Buddhist practice and all spiritual practices are critical for people like us. That's how we ended up sitting here, because we've been at it so long and struggled so much that we just know it very well. But there's a difference between knowing something intellectually and philosophically and practicing it on a day-to-day basis. That makes sense? So we're all learning with you. Please keep that in mind. As I said, I don't like to speak for anybody who leads or does things around here, but knowing them all very well, the only reason they lead and do things around here is because they feel the exact same way that I just expressed. The moment that somebody shows up and says, I want to be a teacher, I have a lot to teach, they never end up sitting here, because they immediately have in their mind this separation or this elevation that they feel they are the teachers and you are the students. And in our approach with Buddhist practice, we don't find that working too well in this country and in this context of Buddhism. So with that being said, I'm grateful you're all here, because it allows me an opportunity to sit and practice and share the teachings and get quiet. So with that, we'll go ahead and we'll start with the meditation practice. There's a couple things I'll tell you before we begin. Nothing's going to happen to you, right? You will not float away. You won't have any mystical, magical experiences. The mind that races all day long is not going to shut off. Don't judge your practice, meaning don't ask yourself, is it working or not working? Are you doing it right or doing it wrong? We're just going to sit. We're going to breathe. You'll hear sounds inside, sounds outside. This is life. Life is filled with chaos. And the practice of meditation is learning to get quiet and still within all that chaos. Posture. If you are on a cushion, often it helps lying to the front third, pushing stomach forward. Allows the back to straighten. Shoulders are relaxed. If you're in the bench or chair, however you're seated, also relaxing the shoulders. Hands can be on the knees or in the lap. If you need to move during meditation, simply move. Movement doesn't make you a bad meditator. It just means your leg hurts. I will guide us as we begin, and we'll settle into a little bit of silence. And starting with the eyes closed if comfortable, or slightly open. Mouth is open or closed. We'll start with taking 3 deep breaths, slowly. And eventually settle into a natural rhythm of the breath. Noticing the mind as it wanders, jumping from thought to thought. We'll start with gently guiding the attention, focus, to the stomach or chest. Breathing in, feel them rise. Breathing out, they fall. Simply continue this practice, observing sensation of breath. Expecting nothing but to sit and breathe. As the mind wanders, lost in thought, recognize it. Release that thought. Return attention, focus to the breath. Where's your mind? Lost in thought? Return attention to the breath. Letting go of expectations. Letting go of judgments from the practice. Simply sitting, breathing. keeping the mind alert. Aware of each sound. Each thought. Each physical sensation. Yet concerned with nothing but sitting, breathing. And with the body still, rested, and the speech quiet, aware of all sounds. And the mind learning to settle. Know what it's like to just sit and breathe. Knowing with each breath, there's nothing else to do. Nowhere else to go. And no one else to be. Everything beautiful, exactly as it is. Sitting, breathing. And once again, taking 3 deep breaths, slowly. And as you slowly open the eyes, slowly begin to move. Most important, with the practice of meditation, is to recognize how you feel now, immediately after. Compare this to how you typically feel throughout your day. Recognize the difference, if there is one. Ask yourselves how you prefer to feel every day for the rest of your life. And realize however you feel now, if it's quiet, calm, and still, or a busy mind, racing mind, whatever you're sitting with at this moment, has nothing to do with anything I said. It's nothing to do with how we sit and hold the hands or cross the legs. It's nothing to do with the sounds around us or anything else for that matter. It's everything to do with your own mind and your own mind's reaction to an external condition. This is what the Buddha called pratitya samuppada, means dependent origination. This is the basis of the Buddha's awakening. The word Buddha simply means awaken. He was a human being, no different than any one of us, who began to understand why he suffered, why he got angry, sad, depressed, stressed, anxious. He began to understand the causal relationship of all phenomena. And what that means, very simply, for all of us, regardless of where you come from or what you believe in or where you think you're going, your whole life is filled with things that happen. You react. More stuff happens, more reactions. That's what we get. This practice is learning what it's like to respond to something quietly, peacefully, still. Because for most of us, the way you responded to the last 20 minutes is quite different from how you respond to every other 20-minute period of your life. And so all we're working on is closing the gap to the way you feel now is closer to how you feel always. Just as driven, motivated, productive, successful, whatever that means to you in your respective lives. But with a mind that's steady, clear, focused, distracted by nothing, disturbed by no one. It's not an easy practice. It's not necessarily fun. Meditation is not an escape, as often people think it is. If your life is a crazy, hectic, stressed out mess, meditation doesn't fix that. It helps you become aware of why your life is a crazy, hectic, stressed out mess. It slows you down so you can then begin to make changes in your life. Meditation is free. Buddhist practice free. Sitting, breathing, becoming aware of what you think, what you say, and what you do. And learning to be kind to yourself and everybody else, always. That's the practice. There are very few things, if any, throughout Buddhist teachings that we all probably weren't taught when we were 5 years old. The challenge is we didn't always listen. And so we create a life where it just ends up being some sort of hectic chaos. I'm sure none of you here, but just in case anybody lives that way. And so these teachings and this practice are really helping you become aware of how your mind works. Buddhist practice is not about learning about anything outside of yourself. It's not about something that existed 2,500 years ago or in a faraway land in other countries and other languages. It's right here, right now, holding up a mirror, looking back at yourself. That's what this practice is. And that's why it's so much fun. Because you get to explore your own level of accountability in your life. And you get to work on dropping. I'm not a big fan of letting go, but to put it into context that most of you may be familiar with, it's letting go or dropping the stories and the blame that you put on everybody else for everything that's wrong in your life. And learning to hold yourself accountable for your choices, your thoughts, your words, and your actions. Yes, every past experience, every trauma, every difficulty, every challenge existed, and it's real. And I'm not discounting the seriousness of that. That is all there. We all have it. But then what choices are we making today to improve the quality of our mind and our hearts? Once we stop trying to change, fix, control, manipulate everything around us, and we work on changing our mind and our reaction to the world around us, life gets simpler. But it is a practice. Someone asked a question earlier, and before I forget, I think in my opening rant I said divorce counselor, but what I meant to say was marriage counselor. All right, the marriage counselor was so good because she had 7 divorces. Just wanted to clarify that in case anybody caught that. Someone asked a question earlier because as we approach the madness of these lovely holiday seasons, which becomes people's greatest time to practice, because some of you may spend time with those that challenge you the absolute most, which is family, loved ones. Those are the ones that challenge us the most, right? And someone asked a question about, how can I sum this up without too many specifics? They already have a conflict in something that's coming up in a few weeks, and they're angry at someone for something. And they wanted to know, I often get these questions, what do those Buddhists do with this type of problem? You know, as if there's some like magic Buddhist pill or something like that, you know? My first reaction is the Buddhist practice is to look at honestly what's actually occurring. And what's actually occurring is something that is completely out of this person's control, and that they, no matter what they think or do, have zero impact on what somebody else does. Yet they're so wrapped up in thinking they can control what somebody else does. We have a hard enough time controlling what we do, let alone what someone else is doing, right? So this individual wants someone else to do or not do a certain thing. And because of this one individual, the person has the opportunity to actually spend time and appreciate and be around 25 other people, or spend their entire 5 days miserable because of one person. So the choice is theirs. And what happens is we often allow other people to have so much power over us. And when we are wrapped up in, and this is why meditation is so important. Meditation is learning to concentrate and focus on the present moment. So the present moment in this example is an opportunity to spend a wonderful time with 25 people you know and love and care about. That's present moment. Getting wrapped up in the anger and the story of it all is being completely frustrated at one person, which will then ruin the present moment of being with the 25. We practice meditation not to be good at meditation. We practice meditation to learn to be with present moment as it occurs. And as we sit in meditation this morning, does anyone know from the sounds what was going on out there? Dog washing, right? You could hear the hose. And my first thought was, I know what's out there, and there's only like 2 plants, so they can't be watering that many plants, right? And then you hear the dog shaking, and then you come back to the breath, and then you hear the hose go, and then you come back, you hear all this stuff. And then you hear the squeaking of when it's getting turned off, and so then they're done, and then you hear the hose being wound up because it's being dragged along the ground, and then you hear the shaking of the dog again, and you hear the dog barking, and if it's anything like my dog, the dog's just barking because they just got showered off and now they want a treat, and they're upset they don't have their treat yet. So all of these things are happening in the moment. That's just what's happening. And the practice is to allow ourselves to be with what's occurring. What we don't want to do is, I'm trying to meditate. They're making noise. How dare they wash their dog during my meditation practice? Don't they know what we're doing in here? I often joke about when there's noise around, especially downtown, that I hope our silence doesn't interrupt their noise, But we are often so attached to what other people are doing. And as we approach the holiday madness and family and friends and loved ones who might potentially do something you don't like, remember that they're human and they're struggling just like you are, and they're doing the best they can. And we don't like being judged all day long. So try not to do that to others. And this is the practice of meditation, being present with life as it is. So good luck with all that. So with that, I'll pause. We'll use the rest of our time this morning for questions, meditation, Buddhist practice, anything you're sitting with, and we'll go from there. Yeah.
I just noticed, I don't know, they may have already been there, but the 2 new statues, they look like warriors. What are those represent?
They are new.
Okay, so.
I was going to message you and tell you they've been there for 2 years, but you've had a rough few months, so I'll go easy on you. Yeah, they are. One is hung and one is ha, and they are, call them Dharma protectors, temple protectors. They are, you'll see them a lot historically, Chinese temples. You'll see Japanese versions of them as well. And the simplest way to explain them is Dharma protectors. So there's also, when you walk in, there's the beautiful black Buddha right on the shrine there as you enter the temple. Above, there's a scroll. His name is Zongkui. He's also, they call him the demon killer, also a protector. So when you go to what I refer to as cultural temples with, say, a Taiwanese Buddhist background, or Thailand Buddhist background, or Japanese, Vietnamese, Korean, you're going to see all kinds of Buddhas, Bodhisattvas, which are enlightened beings, Arhats, enlightened beings, and Dharma protectors, all having various cultural backgrounds. So those were a recent gift. Yeah.
They're like, I like them.
They're pretty cool. They're fierce. You know, they were, let's see, Monday. Yeah. This became their new home Monday. So they're very new. And often when you see, like, not those specifically, but when you see tankas and they have like a wrathful, kind of angry look, the idea behind that is that that's us on the inside. That we often spend so much time trying to make the outside look okay. We're focused on what our appearance is. But the real practice is what's going on the inside. And so the practice of these wrathful deities, or these fierce looking, you see a lot in Tibetan Buddhism, very fierce looking. Their practices and teachings to remind you that we must focus on the inside. Our heart and our mind is where the practice really is. But, you know, often we wake up and we think, well, I don't have to worry about, does my hair look okay? But, you know, does my hair look okay? Does my face look okay? Do my clothes look okay? We spend a lot of time in front of the mirror on that physical appearance, which is really not what the practice is about. So, yeah. Yep. Other questions? Yeah.
What is the absence of view?
What is the absence of view? Yeah, that's a great question. So well, I can start by saying everything I'm about to tell you about absence of view is not absence of view, okay? But I don't know, maybe some great Zen master would have just thrown a rock at you or something, you know? Gently, of course, with love in his heart or her heart, but I don't have a rock here. So the teaching which this may or may not be coming from, that I share quite often, is something that Thich Nhat Hanh, a great Zen master, said. He's a Vietnamese Buddhist monk, and really wonderful teachings. And to me, this is one of the greatest teachings I ever heard. It was probably maybe a handful of years ago now. There's a little 7-minute YouTube clip on what is enlightenment. And what he says is, or what is nirvana, is I think the name of the title. What he says is nirvana is freedom from views. And when I heard that, I was like, okay, well, what's my view on that? You know? So here's this great Zen master saying nirvana is freedom from views. And I'm just some idiot sitting there thinking, like, is that right? Is that wrong? How do I do that? You know, and I have all these challenges and questions and critiques of freedom from views. And the view for me that I eventually settled on is, I have no idea what freedom from views is, or absence of views, as you say. But what I do know is, anyone here have strong views about something? Show of hands. If every hand's not up, you're lying, right? You have strong views. Any of you think those views are right? Any of you attached to those views? Any of you spent like 30 years defending that view and proving it and arguing it? And even when you think or know that you're wrong. You've been fighting it for so long. You're like, well, screw it. I'm just going to keep fighting it because it's my view and I don't want you to be right. We have so many views that we are attached to. Some of these are extreme views, like very important views. Some of them are like, I don't like the color of this shirt. They're things that are not life-threatening. But in the moment, they seem very serious. I mean, I remember shopping 20 years ago, for like 4 hours just to find the perfect shirt to wear on a Saturday before I went out. Right? Like, I know what that is like. So when I say these things, I'm not like making fun of it. I'm just bringing to light the fact that we make ourselves crazy with these views over things that really don't mean much except for fulfilling our own pride and our ego. And then there are views, social justice issues, human rights issues. There are views that are really important. And the practice to me around absence of views is not to abandon, this is just my approach, because I have no idea what absence of views would be like. But not to abandon, right? If I'm going to fight for or have a view strongly about a human rights issue or social justice, right? Any oppression, things like that just eat at me. I'm not letting go of those views. I'm not abandoning those views. But I am going to recognize how attached I am to them. And in my effort to bring those views into the world, am I going to make any room at all for the fact that somebody else might also have a view? And that there's a really good chance their view is not going to be the same as mine? So for me, absence of views or freedom from views as a practice is first recognizing what are the views that I am so attached to that I won't even listen to somebody else's view on it. And can I stop that? Could I actually listen to somebody who is a racist? I have friends that I grew up with that are racist. Straight up. So I have a choice, right? Will I listen to them? Will I try to understand them? Or will I just cross them off like they're the devil and throw them away? What good would that do? They're human, just like we are. They've had experiences that taught them to be that way. They weren't born that way. And I just picked that one example. There are endless examples, right? People are not born racist. But based on their social conditioning, their family upbringing, where they live, their experiences, things that they encounter, and sometimes at a really early age, they become racist. That's their view. I don't agree with it. I don't like it. I don't accept it. But I have to listen to them. I take that back. I don't have to listen to them. I choose to. Because I believe that the only way, all the Dalai Lama, Thich Nhat Hanh, Martin Luther King, all the greats on these topics, they're all saying the same thing. You must love each other no matter what. You must listen to each other no matter what. You must try to understand no matter what. Doesn't mean you got to go celebrating with them and hanging out with them. So, absence of views means, can my heart open to the fact that maybe I'm not right? I mean, I'm pretty convinced on the racist thing, I'm right. But on, let's drop it down about 17 notches from something like that. And just everyday things that we argue over, meaningless little things that we argue over, we pick fights over, right? A lot of those things soften a little bit. Maybe you're not right. Maybe somebody else is right. So, yeah, does that help? Yeah. Yeah.
Well, going back to like listening, like I think there's a difference between like active listening and like if you're really attached to a view to like kind of in your head when they're talking to like try to make sense of what you want to say to them to make them change their mind.
Right.
So I was just wondering how you would approach that, like to kind of bring yourself back to like the present with that.
To not be trying to tell your, like, to not. So if I understand what you're asking is, in the moment, like active listening, in the moment that someone is sharing something with you, you don't disagree with it, you're asking about how to just listen to them in a very present way versus while they're talking in your head, you're already creating your argument that you're ready to try to throw back at them and change their mind.
Right, like if the motive for talking to them in the first place is to change their.
Understood. So the follow-up for those who didn't hear it was, if the motive in talking to them in the first place was to change their minds, right? So there's the problem right there, right? If we go into situations with this idea that we're trying to change someone else's mind, it's going to be very hard to listen to them. The other thing is, just on a practical sense, right? And I think the Buddhist teachings on compassion and wisdom really apply here. If we go into a dialogue or a conversation with someone and we are so focused on winning, right? It becomes this like battle, like I'm going to win. I'm going to prove you're wrong. I spend a majority of my life fighting and going into every situation ready with my argument, right? That doesn't even give you an opportunity to listen. So I think the practice and the question for you and for all of us is, can I just show up and listen and let go of this, I'm going to teach you something and I'm going to change your mind? Just listen, right? I mean, coming back to, because it's such a heavy topic and such a real thing that we all face, coming back to dealing with someone who is racist, I can't change their mind unless I understand them to begin with. So if you lined up 10 racists for me to sit and talk to, and all I have is one story, not going to work. Each one of them became that way for a different reason, potentially. So even if you go into a situation and you want to try to change their views or open their minds or change their hearts, you first have to listen to them anyways, to understand why they are the way they are. Does that make sense? And in any conflict, in any relationship, anyone in here ever been in a relationship where you've had challenges, right? And we go into that like argument, it was a fight in the morning and now it's like afternoon and you've been preparing your story for like 3 hours, and you're ready to fight. Try listening and understanding what the other person is feeling and going through. And not make it about you, right? In so many situations, we make everything about us. And in situations like I brought up, or maybe, like what you're asking about, it becomes about us. That we want them to have a different view because that's our view. So the Bodhisattva practice is to go beyond having expectations. So anytime I'm going to sit with somebody in the nature that I've already discussed, or any, anything less intense than that, as a practice, I don't go into it having any expectation of convincing anyone of anything. And dropping that takes away the fight, because there's no longer anything to win, right? I've learned through Buddhist teachings to never expect anything from anyone ever. That is such a hard practice. But because we have expectations of others, then we want to convince them, and we expect them to eventually take our view or our way. But for me, this practice of not expecting anything from anyone ever has been a game changer. And that doesn't mean that you can just be in a relationship that's miserable and say, well, this sucks, right? If it's unhealthy, remove yourself from it. But to have these overly burdened expectations of how we want the world to be and to treat us, they have their own mess, So I think you can ask yourself, am I really listening, or am I only listening because I want to change them? And if you're only listening to change them, then that's back on you, which says this is about me and I want you to agree with me. And the practice is to kind of move away from that scenario and understand that they're going to have whatever, you can still share thoughts and views. And I'm just speaking very broadly, generally here, right? The individual still, at the end of the day, is going to make their choice on their views. Okay? You ever had anyone try to convince you of something? Ever had it not work? And then you tried really hard. So it's the same thing. We could try really hard to convince someone of something and it won't work. And sometimes it will,
It's more like going back to the racist thing. Like if you're talking to somebody who is a racist and you hold fast to that belief, and you do compassionately listen, and you're not even coming up with a something to spit back at them, but if the motive of you listening to them is to kind of get to know them better so that you can change how racist people think, I guess. Because I'm
right.
Overall, even if it's just not in that interaction, it's just get to know them.
Understood. But I'm pretty certain, and so in that situation, right, I don't go into a situation with an old friend who's racist with the objective to change them. It's not my goal. I can only do and say and share who I am and what I am and how I live. But it's not my place to change people. In fact, that doesn't work. We can't change people. Think about that. Whether you're dealing with racism or anything, you can't change somebody else. Who has to change? They do. You share your heart, your mind, your thoughts, your views. They have to do the changing if and when they want. Again, as I alluded to earlier, we have a hard enough time changing ourselves. So why do we think that we can change other people? Right? So, to me, the best way with any situation is to bring kindness and compassion, listening, understanding into each conversation and dialogue. And yes, it sure would be nice if you could have one conversation with people like that and have them change, but it doesn't work that way. But in most cases like that, people like that are filled with lots of hate, lots of anger, lots of fear. And the last thing they need is another person to hate. So, yeah. Good stuff. Nice light topics on a Saturday morning. Thanks all for being here. So we'll go ahead and we'll close on that. We'll join palms. May the benefit of this practice be shared with all beings in all directions. May all be at peace. May all be free from suffering. May any merit gained from this practice be transferred to the more than 4 million lives that have been lost during this pandemic, and to all their family and friends who continue to suffer to this day. May they all be at peace and free from suffering. May we all be at peace and free from suffering. So a few quick announcements. Thanks all for being here. My name is Jeff. I'm a Dharma bum. We opened up this temple nearly 15 years ago to introduce Buddhist practice to those who show up. As I alluded to earlier, those of us who lead, we're not monks, we're not nuns, we're not gurus, we're not masters, we're not teachers, we're not looking for students, we're just practitioners. We do our best to take our understanding of Buddhist teachings and put it into terms that hopefully make sense to those who show up. Just about every night, we have different practices going on. As most of you know, we did shut down for 16 months due to the pandemic. We opened up about 3.5 months ago. So we have just a few classes in person. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday nights are here. Tuesday, I lead. Alex does the loving kindness on Wednesday, and Travis does the basics and meditation on Thursday. And then here again Saturday morning. Everything else is on Zoom. We have 2 recovery classes in person. Tuesday night is downstairs. That, like this morning, requires an RSVP, and Sunday morning recovery meets here. Other than that, just check the website for the calendar schedule. We also sit Monday through Friday in the morning, 8 and 8:30. So if you want to come sit for 25 minutes, it's just a silent meditation. It's not a class. There's a bell that gets hit. You sit for 25 minutes, and then a bell gets hit again. So it's a nice, quiet way to start the day if you'd like that. And then the temple does close all day, unfortunately. We're still not open throughout the day. We open up again in the evening. Saturday, Sunday, the temple is open 12 to 3 if anybody wants to stick around and sit. Same thing, Buddha for You is pretty much closed all week. It is open. It opens now downstairs Saturday and Sunday, 12 to 3. Sunday, 11:30 to 3. But so if you need anything, Maggie's down there downstairs. And also, Tom, we have you sticking around? Yeah, okay. Every Saturday, we used to do a kind of more formal Saturday, 12 to 2 or 12 to 3 cleaning and gardening. But again, with the pandemic, we're still very hesitant and gentle with what we reopen to. So, but we are doing just outside now. So if anybody does want to stick around today for 5 minutes to an hour or 2 hours and just sweep, pick up leaves and move some rocks, whatever it is outside, there'll be a little crew gathering out front. If you're not prepared or can't say today and it's something you want to do in the future and you want to stick around, pretty much every Saturday after class, there's some people out there gardening. So you're always welcome to do that. Other than that, thanks for being here. Appreciate the gentle questions this morning. Good questions, good stuff to explore. So as you go out there today and are nice to every single person you encounter, thank you for doing that. So good luck. We'll see you soon.
Is there any hope doing the John Run Life course again?
Not yet. Yeah, at some point, but
Yeah, I was getting ready to do it right before the pandemic. You're gonna do one, that kind of.
it's not on the radar yet.
Yeah.
But I'd look at end of next year,
Okay.
at the earliest.